Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Motorsports for another daily live news roundup here on Forever Motorsports. Please do be sure to like the video before we do get started and subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed. And if this is your first time here, please do be sure to go and check out the link in the description for all of our channel partners, Bitdefender, as well as our betting partner, Boyle Sports. We'll get right into it though with the news of the day. A update on Daniel Ricciardo, as it has been revealed that his return is still a while away. Daniel Ricciardo's return to the Formula 1 paddock has been revealed. It is a while away in the latest update on Ricciardo's hand injury. The comeback season for Daniel Ricciardo has been far from optimum, after replacing Nick de Vries 2 races before the mid-season break. The 34-year-old looked in good form before an unfortunate crash in Zandvoort, which ruled him out from racing once again. Following the Dutch Grand Prix, the question of Ricciardo's return has always been an important one. The race quotes AlphaTauri's head of trackside engineering, Jonathan Edels, as he gives the latest update on Ricciardo's comeback. Following a crash during FP2 in Zandvoort, Ricciardo broke his left hand, rendering him unable to drive in Formula 1. After surgery though, Helmut Marko revealed the full extent of the 34-year-old's injury, as he admitted to Ricciardo having 7 fractures. In his absence though, Liam Lawson stepped up to fill in the seat and has impressed everyone since then. Despite Lawson's impressive performances, all eyes are still on Ricciardo's return as he vies for a Red Bull seat in the future. With each passing race, the tale of Ricciardo's return adds a new page to it. While there were hopes of the Austrian driver racing in Singapore, it was later revealed that he would only be involved in an engineering role in the paddock. The Qatar Grand Prix was next in line for Ricciardo's return, but the race reports Edel's words as he states that Ricciardo won't be back for a while. He was quoted as saying, "The comeback is still a while away, so we wouldn't want to put a target on it. From our side and his side, there's no rush to get him back too early." Edels added that the recovery was going well for Ricciardo and that the team has planned some simulator work for him soon. Judging by his words, the earliest possible comeback for Ricciardo should be the US Grand Prix later in October. As such though, Lawson has one more race to leave a lasting impression, despite Ricciardo and Tsunoda being named AlphaTauri drivers for the next season. Liam Lawson made one of the most chaotic Formula 1 debuts when he had to replace Ricciardo a day before the Dutch Grand Prix. However, it was not too daunting for the New Zealander as he stepped up and put in an incredible drive with little time to practice. He then knocked out Max Verstappen in Q2 in Singapore and became only the second AlphaTauri driver to score points this season. In Japan, Lawson once again outperformed his teammates and secured a P11 finish. Despite so many achievements in such a short time, Lawson did not see himself earning a permanent seat for next season as AlphaTauri chose to go with the Ricciardo-Tsunoda pairing, while Lawson would fulfill a sim and reserve driver role for the next season. Lawson has also gone on to state that he took no satisfaction from beating Tsunoda in Japan after missing out on the 2024 AlphaTauri seat. Liam Lawson insists he did not take satisfaction from being the lead AlphaTauri driver across the line at this weekend's Japanese Grand Prix, after it was confirmed earlier in the week that he would not be racing for the team full-time in 2024. AlphaTauri confirmed last week that Daniel Ricciardo, for whom Lawson has been filling in since he broke his hand in Zandvoort, and Yuki Tsunoda would be their next driver lineup for 2024, with Lawson set to take a reserve role at the team next year. Following the announcement, Lawson finished P11 ahead of Tsunoda in 12th, with the pair even going wheel to wheel in the opening exchanges of the Japanese Grand Prix, but Lawson was keen to play down the significance of Sunday's results. Asked if he was satisfied with beating Tsunoda, Lawson said, "Not satisfaction I want. I want to be in the seat, and I don't have one right now. So it's basically doing the best job I can each time I get in the car. And basically keep doing that for as long as I'm driving." As for the race, the Kiwi felt that his team maximised their performance, believing that the only cars they were capable of fighting with were the Alpines of Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly in 9th and 10th. And even they were too quick for them. "We didn't quite have the speed on Sunday," Lawson said. "I think when all the teams finish and there's no retirements, and to be honest, the only guys we were really racing were potentially the Alpines today, and they were too quick." So it meant that we were just outside of the points, unfortunately. I think we feel pretty much maximized. The fight with Yuki was aggressive, but I think it was fair as well. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough though, and I think neither of us had the pace to make the top 10. I'm still trying to score points for the team and prove myself every time I get in the car, and I think that is what I did today. Certainly, Liam Lawson has been getting a lot of eyes on him at the moment. He's been performing really well. He had a great performance out in Singapore. He had another great weekend out in Suzuka. Will we see him getting a full-time race seat possibly in 2024? I doubt it because he is a Red Bull contracted driver. I think possibly 2025 is the season that he is certainly going to be focusing towards. He's still got that seat in Super Formula, in the Japanese Super Formula that is. He's currently leading that championship and will return, I think, after this. I'm trying to think when that is. After Qatar possibly is when the season finale is for his Super Formula Championship. Hopefully he can still go on to win that. He is currently leading the points for that and should go on to win that season. But yeah, we'll have to say Mark there in the comments saying hello, as well as saying we want Daniel Ricciardo back in Formula 1. We certainly do. It's disappointing that he hasn't been able to come back for quite some time. But hopefully now with this new update, we should see him late October. Disappointing, we would have liked to have seen him back in Qatar, but we understand that he is trying to recover with his hand, and they don't want to rush it and cause any further injuries on his half. So, yeah, glad to see though that recovery is going quite well, and we should see him back in the paddock very, very soon. Moving over to our next article, George Russell can't argue against Lewis Hamilton's status in Mercedes, especially with their hierarchy, says Anthony Davidson. Mercedes teammates Lewis Hamilton and George Russell have been in two wheel-to-wheel battles in the last two races. Sky Sports Formula 1's Anthony Davidson says Russell would be more vocal if it weren't for Hamilton's status as a 7-time world champion. George Russell can't argue with teammate Lewis Hamilton holding a higher status in the Mercedes hierarchy, according to Sky Sports' Anthony Davidson. The Silver Arrows duo have tussled on track in each of the last two races, with Russell momentarily becoming exasperated by the contest during the Japanese Grand Prix on Sunday. Russell impressively outscored Hamilton during his debut campaign with the team last year, but the 7-time world champion has hit back to lead his teammate by 75 points, with six races remaining in 2023. While Russell is never shy to make suggestions over the team radio, Davidson suspects Hamilton's legendary standing with the sport and at Mercedes plays a large part in the younger driver's respectful and polite approach to communications. There's definitely a hierarchy in that team, Davidson said. And rightly so. You know Lewis has earned that status in that team as a 7-time world champion, and George can't argue against that. George is still the understudy, and he's doing a very good job on those occasions where he's got the speed over Lewis. But he's doing it in such a George Russell way, which is quite humorous to watch because I know inside the car he'll be fuming and steaming. And that's why we see the near misses, the drivers coming almost to blows, almost to contact. But then he's a good boy on the radio, he's very British about it. And then there are layers to him, to the annoyance. I think it always comes over as, I'm okay with this, but if you could please, very thankfully, let me through within a couple of opportunities, it would be more appreciated. And we hear maybe a bit more vocal if things were different, but I think for now, he knows where he is in that team. After scoring 8 podiums in the first season with Mercedes, including the team's only one of 2022, Russell has made the top 3 just once in the second campaign. The 25-year-old appeared on course to add a second before a dramatic final lap crash in Singapore, which gifted Hamilton a 5th podium of his campaign. Having recently signed contract extensions, both Hamilton and Russell are tied to the team until the end of the 2025 season. Russell knows he's got the speed. We'll see it as well from the outside, Davidson added. Lewis is getting his elbows out when he needs to. I'm really intrigued by this battle and watching George develop as a driver and watching Lewis in his latter years in his career. It's certainly going to be very exciting to see how this teammate relationship continues to develop. Hopefully we don't get another repeat of a Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton relationship at Mercedes. It would certainly be something that Toto Wolff and the rest of the management back there will be trying to mitigate and not allow to happen, because they don't want to have two drivers fighting it out every race weekend and possibly getting upset with each other and causing collisions, because that's of course the absolute last thing a team would want, is for both of their drivers to crash into each other. But so far they have been very respectful and have not had any on-track collisions with each other, which is what they would want to see. Moving on though, Lewis Hamilton has continued to say after the Japanese Grand Prix and has voiced his frustrations and expectations ahead of next season. Lewis Hamilton has admitted Mercedes will fail to achieve their own expectations set out for the season. Since the technical regulations brought in 2022, the teams have often struggled, sliding from winning multiple championships to having to settle for third, behind runaway leaders Red Bull and Ferrari. This year, they are once again in a similar predicament. While they are currently 20 points ahead of Ferrari in the season, they have failed to close the gap to Red Bull, out in front, and have less than half of their total points this season. They also currently have 66 fewer points than at the same stage last year, despite them being a team that has historically swept home in the trophy stakes. Mercedes fighting for 5th and 6th place in the races has too often become the norm. The improvement made by their rivals this season has only further given the Brackley-based team a headache in their fight, and this discouraging reality has led Hamilton to accept that the 2023 season has not been a success. Make no mistake though, it is very frustrating on all of us to realize we are not going to meet the expectations we had 12 months ago, he told news reporters. After the near victory in Singapore, Mercedes have had to wait almost a year since their last win, with George Russell claiming the 2022 Sao Paulo Grand Prix. The drought for Hamilton has been even longer, and performances akin to their Japanese Grand Prix trivials will only delay that further. Post-race, Hamilton touched on his chaotic Sunday race after suffering early damage and then fighting against his own teammate for 5th place. Well, it was a super hard race. From the beginning, I had contact with Checo and got damage on my end plate, which led to a very difficult race. George was very difficult not to touch him. We were fighting for the position very hard, but fair. In the end, we had to work as a team to get a very good result for ourselves. I just had an undrivable car, very difficult racing all weekend. Moving on from that note though, Hamilton has gone on to say Mercedes needs to have the best ever 6 months of Formula 1 development to catch Red Bull over the winter break before the 2024 season gets underway. Lewis Hamilton has said that Mercedes needs the greatest 6 months of Formula 1 car development in its history if it is to close the gap to Red Bull next year. After a disappointing Japanese Grand Prix weekend, where Mercedes found itself appearing to have only the 4th fastest car, it is aware of how far ahead Red Bull remains right now. And Hamilton, who has been pushing hard for Mercedes to totally revamp its concept, says that there should be no shying away from accepting the size of the gap that needs to be closed before the start of the 2024 season. I have no idea where the car is going to be next year, but we're a long way away, he said. We've got to hope for the next 6 months to be the greatest 6 months of development that we've ever had to close the gap and to be really banging on the door. While the time gap to the front looks sizable, Hamilton thinks that the examples of McLaren, which has changed car approach to help it, emerge as Red Bull's main rival now, is proof of the leap that this team can make. He went on to say, the evidence is there at McLaren, and we can't turn a blind eye to that. To look at what we've done and go in that direction, he said. That is the direction. But I truly believe my team can do it, and we've always been great at putting downforce on the car. It's just that, with the way that our car currently works, adding downforce just doesn't work. It just makes it bounce more. Hopefully with a change in philosophy, we'll be back to where the team deserves, because this is a World Championship team. We're still an amazing team. I have absolute faith in everybody. But decisions that are made in this period of time are critical for our trajectory. 12 months ago, Mercedes began to make progress with its W13 car, and that culminated in a taking victory at the Brazilian Grand Prix. One consequence of that triumph was it left the squad convinced that it was on the right development path with its concept, so it stuck to its guns for 2023. That proved to be a mistake, especially with the team pitching its aero platform around a too high a ride height. This left it unable to make hoped for gains. Hamilton said just fighting for good points positions now was hard work, but it was important to do the help the team Constructors' Championship efforts. I'm giving absolutely everything, but it's tough on weekends like this, particularly where the car is such a handful, he said. Basically, it's the same thing as last year. Feeling-wise, the car just felt the same as last year. It's bouncing and sliding, so that's tough given how much we've done to progress, and we're not any closer to the front, at least here. So it's certainly going to be a bit of a difficult off-season for Mercedes. They're going to have to do a lot of work to be able to try and catch the Red Bulls for next year, but they have at least been able to see what the Red Bulls' flaws look like. They may be able to copy their concepts like that. Before next year, of course, Red Bull are going to be developing their car even further going into next year, but we'll have to wait and see whether Mercedes can make big enough gains to be able to catch up to them for this year. Well, for next year, rather. Orville there in the comments yet again saying, yes, but George has age on his side, as well as he says Mercedes is a conservative company, given that they're given time, they will learn from their mistakes and come back probably stronger. Yes, I think that's possibly the issue with Mercedes. They're not willing to make mistakes. Well, I mean, we're saying they're not willing to make mistakes, but they have made mistakes for 2 years in a row, and they have learned from these mistakes. They should come back there. They've shown in the past that they are a championship-winning team, and I have no doubt that they're going to be able to bounce back from their current slump in Formula 1 and will be able to come back and fight for championships. I think in the next year or two even. Moving on though from Mercedes, Sergio Perez's father has disagreed with Sergio Perez's criticism and has come out and said that the RB19 is made for Verstappen. Whereas Max Verstappen has been so dominant that he has won 13 out of 16 Grand Prix this season, Sergio Perez has been disappointing. The Mexican crashed out of the Japanese Grand Prix on Sunday due to his own mistakes. Despite the disappointing results of late, Antonio Perez, Sergio's father, stated in advance of the race that his son is very important for Formula 1. As Verstappen's teammate, Perez is having a tough time. The Mexican is not as good with the RB19 as his Dutch teammate, and thus is painfully visible in the results. Verstappen can become champion in Qatar as early as the sprint race, while Perez is almost already 200 points behind. Checo's father has come out and said, though, that his son is very important to the sport. He said, today, Sergio Perez is the most solid driver in Formula 1. If you look at how many fans he has around the world, how many Mexican flags do you see in Japan? He is the only Latin American driver. Add to that how many are fans of him. Any brand in the world would be happy with a Checo Perez. In Singapore, Red Bull as a whole were disappointed, but Perez finished far behind Verstappen. Antonio Perez explains why. They were struggling with the new floor, testing the grip of the tyre that will compete next year, and this tyre did not benefit Red Bull that much. Checo continues to battle. The car is set for Max, because he drives with all the grip at the front, and Checo has done it all the time with the grip at the back. So, Checo Perez's father has come up and said, and pretty much claimed that Red Bull car is solely built around Max Verstappen. We have heard, though, from Sergio Perez that he is working with the team to try and develop the car in the direction that he prefers and may benefit him a bit more. Hopefully next season the car does help Sergio Perez a little bit more in certain aspects and helps with his drivability. But at a certain point, you also have to expect Sergio Perez to change his driving style. We've seen it in the past with Daniel Ricciardo in the McLaren. He struggled with the driving style of the McLaren. He had to change it to adapt to that team. We've seen other drivers as well as Fernando Alonso. The car was different, of course, in Aston Martin. Every team that you go to has a different driving philosophy, and you have to adapt your driving style ever so slightly. And unfortunately, Sergio Perez is really struggling with the current RB19 because Max really likes a pointy car, which means you've got the majority of the grip in the front tyres, but the rear can be a little bit loose. So Sergio Perez clearly doesn't like this, and we've seen this because of the mistakes and crashes he's had. Because the car is, of course, very difficult for him to drive. I think if you put anyone else in that car, they'd also struggle because that car is so pointed towards Max. But at the same time, yeah, he has been spending a lot of time with his engineers and making small changes. And we've seen that in the latter half of the year. Of course, he had a dismal race in Japan, but we should hopefully see him maybe picking it up a little bit more in these last few races. There's a few more street circuits coming. I think he did quite well last year in Qatar as well. I certainly wouldn't count him out. So just looking for the last few races, I think Sergio Perez hopefully does have a good couple races. He's also, of course, got his home Grand Prix coming up, the Mexican Grand Prix. That's one of his dreams, to win that race. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see for the next few races what happens. Yeah, lots of people now voting in our poll that we currently have going. Which drivers do you want in the second seat at Williams? Mick Schumacher currently taking 50% of that poll, Felipe Dragovich with 17%, and Other with 33%. If you did vote for Other, please do be sure to let us know in the comment section who you are voting for there. Moving on to an article now about Charles Leclerc. Leclerc predicts a very close fight for P2 in the Constructors' Championship after Ferrari and Mercedes have had their scrap at Suzuka. Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc is bracing himself for a title battle. Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc is bracing himself for a tight battle with Mercedes over second place in the Constructors' Championship as the 2023 season enters its closing stages after the two teams fought hard for the positions during the Japanese Grand Prix. Mercedes entered the Suzuka weekend 24 points clear of Ferrari, but departed with that advantage trimmed to 20 points. Leclerc leading Lewis Hamilton home in fourth, and Carlos Sainz finishing ahead of George Russell. Mercedes entered the Suzuka weekend 24 points clear of Ferrari, but departed with that advantage trimmed to 20 points. Leclerc leading Lewis Hamilton home in fourth, and Carlos Sainz finishing ahead of George Russell. It came on a day when rivals McLaren were out of reach for both teams, as Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri emerged as the nearest challengers to Max Verstappen and Red Bull, who secured their second successive Constructors' title. Reflecting on his race, which included a bold late move on the one stopping Russell around the outside of turns 1 and 2, Leclerc said, "The McLarens were really strong today. There wasn't much we could have done better. I had to be really aggressive on the pass to George in order not to lose too much time, and that worked really well, and then just managed my tyres to the end, so I'm happy with today's performance." Pushed on the importance of beating Mercedes to P2 in the Constructors' Championship, he added, "I mean, they are strong, especially in the race today. They were on it, and they put us under a bit of pressure in the end." Splitting the cars too was an interesting strategy, so they are strong in the race, especially in the qualifying. In the qualifying, they are a bit more inconsistent though. Splitting the cars too was an interesting strategy, so they are strong in the race especially. In the qualifying, they are a bit more inconsistent, but it's going to be a very close fight. In the race, we are a bit more inconsistent. They are in qualifying, but I have a feeling inside that we have learned a few things in the last weekends that hopefully will give us the upper hand for the rest of the season. As for Sainz, the Spaniard made his final stops later than those around him and had to stage a mini fight back in the closing laps, crossing the line just 8/10 behind Hamilton. When it came to race pace, I couldn't get into my rhythm. Managed my tyres well. When it came to race pace, I could get into my rhythm, managed my tyres well, and honestly very, very strong pace, Sainz commented. Unfortunately, we couldn't show it, as we were always in the dirty air and a bit stuck. We had a very good start, pace management. The pit stop cost us with Lewis, the last stop, and I had to come back on them. But I think we can be happy with how it went. 6 rounds now remain on the 2023 calendar, with visits to Qatar with a sprint weekend, Austin as well having a sprint weekend, Mexico, and then Brazil with a sprint weekend, Las Vegas and Abu Dhabi to finish off the season to follow, and 309 points still up for grabs. Certainly means that there is still a lot of fighting to do between the Ferraris and the Mercedes throughout these final upcoming races. It's going to be a very tight battle, and will we see the Ferraris being able to possibly steal that away from the Mercedes to just further upset their season and maybe just set them back a little bit in terms of their development, because then they will have a little bit less money to spend for next season. Of course, the Constructors' Championship allow you to get a lot more budget for the next season by getting an allocation of the pot of winnings money for the season. So we'll have to wait and see what does happen in these final few races, but it's going to be very, very tight from the Ferraris and the Mercedes, who are not going to be wanting to give up any points to the other team. Moving on though to one of our final articles here and seeing a few more people Commenting here, Orville Clisby saying he's a mistake-prone driver, speaking about Sergio Perez. JP saying no idea where the constructors will end up after Red Bull, as each weekend is showing completely different favourites. Awesome to have Ferrari and Mercedes, as well as McLaren and Alonso, competing closely together. I like that you say all the different teams and then Alonso, not a team, because of course Lance Stroll is really quite far back off of his teammates at the moment. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what all of these drivers are going to be able to do. What Ferrari and Mercedes are going to be able to do. It's going to be really, really exciting to see them fighting it out to the end. As I said, though, moving on to the next article, and this kind of ties into our poll that we've got running right now. I see a few more people have gone out and voted for Mick Schumacher. Yeah, let's have a look at this next article. 6 stars are currently in the shootout for Logan Sargent's Formula 1 seat. Another race and another Sunday of suffering for Williams Formula 1 rookie Logan Sargent. At the worst possible time for a poor performance. Days earlier, AlphaTauri silenced those wondering which 2 of their 3 races would drive for them in 2024, leaving Sargent's seat as the sole unknown for the next season. Japan was when the American needed to show signs that he is improving at a sufficient pace that Williams would be foolish to look elsewhere, but that wasn't to be. Team principal James Vowles now faces one of the toughest tasks of his tenure at the team's helm to make the right call on who will partner Alex Albon for 2024. Fortunately for Vowles, there's no shortage of possibilities, and arguably he can't lose no matter his decision. Here's who is in the frame to race for Williams in 2024. Logan Sargent, of course the easiest choice, is often to make none and stick to their course. For Williams, that means backing their former academy driver and giving him another year to learn and improve. AlphaTauri's team principal Franz Tost is perhaps the authority figure on working with Formula 1 rookies, and he believes a driver needs 3 seasons to be at their best. If Vowles believes the same, then keeping with Sargent amid the mounting pressure might be a masterstroke. Despite his very public struggles to adapt to Formula 1, Sargent's junior years had him laps away from beating Oscar Piastri to the Formula 3 crown. And he was just 1 point away from Liam Lawson in Formula 2 last year, despite the Kiwi boasting more experience. Williams saw enough potential in Sargent to bring him into the fold in 2021, so perhaps they will see growth in the Floridian. On the other hand, former boss Jos Capito, with not Vowles, brought Sargent in, and has plenty to change at Groves since the German's departure. The next candidate would be Liam Lawson. A solid case of recency bias has fans cooing over Liam Lawson's results since coming into the sport. That's not unfounded, with the New Zealander impressing everyone by stepping into Daniel Ricciardo's shoes and scoring points just 3 races into his Formula 1 career. The decision to opt for age and experience over his youthful hungriness in AlphaTauri's 2024 driver lineup was curious after Lawson's bombastic arrival, but that might be to Williams' advantage. Alex Albon is a talented driver transformed at the Oxfordshire team after escaping his Red Bull past, and Lawson might continue that trend. Piastri is the living embodiment that a driver with the ability can soar, no matter their experience, and Lawson's 4 races reinforces that view. At the risk of looking like a Red Bull refugee centre, Williams would do well with an Albon-Lawson partnership. I like that. Red Bull refugee centre. Mick Schumacher, though, is also in the driver lineup for that Williams seat for next season. It is clear, though, that Toto Wolff wants Mick Schumacher to be racing, just not in one of his cars. A similar situation came in 2019 after George Russell won Formula 2 but couldn't land a drive at Mercedes for his troubles. Williams were the team to profit from the Britain's talents, and as he honed his craft, culminating in that unforgettable P2 qualification at the Belgian Grand Prix, Schumacher could follow a similar path through the 2020 Formula 2, though the 2020 Formula 2 champion hasn't shown the same aptitude as Russell for finding stable Formula 1 footing. Nonetheless, he's the driver with the most Grand Prix to his name in the frame for that drive. And Williams would benefit from having 2 drivers who know the sport well. however, has dropped Schumacher for a reason, as the German continued finding himself in the wall. Williams would do well to get Wolff to offer a power unit discount should they swap one era-prone racer with another. However, it appears Schumacher could already be on his way to Alpine. Felipe Drugovich is currently the reserve driver for the Aston Martin team, but is also in contention for this drive. The driver that dominated the 2022 Formula 2 Championship is without a drive as well, while the one that finished 117 points behind in P4 races for Williams. It's a funny old sport. While Piastri escaped his year on the sidelines to somehow end up on a podium, or at a podium-worthy team in 2022's sensational silly season, Drugovich remains in the shadows. Unless Lawrence Stroll disowns his own son, Aston Martin is not where the Brazilian will get a racing opportunity soon. So, jumping to Williams could be his best bet. While Logan Sargent faltered in 2022, Drugovich's consistency had him take the Formula 2 title. But he is an unknown quantity in Formula 1 machinery for Williams to risk. Would Stroll Sr. finally incentivize a rival team to take one of his drivers to sweeten the deal? One of all drivers in the frame, I think Drugovich is likely, or most unlikely. Perhaps Fernando Alonso has shared retirement plans with Aston Martin and they'll need a race-ready replacement for 2025. Frederick Vesti is also one of the drivers in contention. He is currently a Mercedes development driver, and he is on track to reach Formula 1 in the future. A Mercedes junior driver on the same trajectory as George Russell once followed is current Formula 2 title challenger Frederick Vesti. The Danish driver is perhaps the best of the 2023 Formula 2 field, but hasn't had luck falling in his favour like championship leader Teo Pourchaire. Nonetheless, we've seen with Piastri and Drugovich that winning Formula 2 doesn't guarantee anything, while Sargent, Tsunoda, Zhou, and even high-flying Norris found themselves at the top without a title. If Wolff wants Vesti as a possible Hamilton replacement, he'll need the 21-year-old racer in Formula 1 sooner rather than later, so Williams would make sense. As with Drugovich, whether Williams would want an unknown is the issue, but a 2017 Valtteri Bottas-like deal where the team would get a Mercedes engine discount could sway them. Bowles would like Vesti's no-nonsense approach, which is somewhat reminiscent of his former driver Nico Rosberg during Mercedes' years of domination. I'd argue that Albon makes the possibility of Williams repeating that cycle of incubating a Mercedes driver far less problematic than recent years with Russell. So Vesti might be the surprise choice. The final driver that is in contention for the seat is of course Teo Pourchaire, who is currently on his way to clinch the Formula 2 championship. The likely 2023 Formula 2 champion would buck the trend of the title-winning driver failing to find a Formula 1 seat if he joined Williams for 2024. Working against the Frenchman is a total lack of affiliation with Williams or engine partner Mercedes, but stranger things have happened. Pourchaire is the latest prodigy child of Frederick Vasseur, in the same way Charles Leclerc once was, and he impressed many in his early feeder series days. The success story stumbled upon reaching Formula 2, while Piastri and Drugovich destroyed their competition. But Pourchaire is finally fulfilling the potential in his third season. With Vasseur leaving the Sauber operation for Ferrari, there's a question mark hanging over Pourchaire's head on where he stands next. Williams would be a surprise landing spot, but he beat Sargent in Formula 2 last year, and looks set to take the 2023 crown. So Pourchaire should be in the running too. Certainly a lot of chat over who is going to take that Williams seat next year. It's all to play for still, and really is making a lot of headlines around the world as to who could get that seat. Do be sure to vote in that poll that we still have running right now. Mick Schumacher with 57%, Felipe Drugovich with 14%, Logan Sargent with none, and 29% going to other. It's going to be very interesting to see who does get into that seat, and whoever does is going to be very lucky because that Williams car has had a resurgence in pace in the season. So it's certainly going to be a seat that a lot of drivers would love to get into. Albon has been performing really, really well in that car this season. So yeah, hopefully we do. I'd love to see Mick Schumacher in that seat because I'd love for him to get another opportunity in Formula 1. but we don't really know who Williams is going to come out and choose for that seat this year. Or next year, rather. Just to wrap up here today, I wanted to read out a tweet here from Formula Racers, just going over the driver contracts expiring in 2024. Next year's silly season is certainly ramping up to be one of the craziest in recent memory, with Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, Nico Hulkenberg, Kevin Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo, all with their contracts up for... well, all of their contracts are expiring at the end of next year. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see where all of these drivers move. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 drivers out of 20 on the grid with their contracts expiring. So who is going to remain and who will get the axe or possibly move to another team? It's going to be very, very exciting. But that has been it from me here today with the Formula 1 news for you guys. Thank you very, very much for joining me. I have been Reece here on Forever Motorsports. Do be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you want to see any more Formula 1 content, do be sure to go and check out all of our other videos though. But once again, thank you very much. I have been Reece here on Forever Motorsports.